My uncle didn't just overwork me. He bragged about it in front of customers like my exhaustion was proof he owned me. It happened at 6:03 a.m. in Boise, Idaho, inside our family store, Cedar Pine Market, while I was unloading milk crates with hands so cold they barely closed. My uncle Victor Morales, the store manager, stood by the entrance with his coffee and laughed when he saw me sway. "Look at you," he said loud enough for the early regulars to hear. "Too weak to lift a box, but somehow you're always strong enough to cash your paycheck." I kept my voice steady. "I worked 70 hours last week. The paycheck says 40. Victor's smile widened, cruel and easy. "Because you're family. Family doesn't count hours." A customer glanced away. Another pretended not to hear. Then Victor leaned in, eyes flicking to my phone where I'd just gotten a text from my mom's clinic, and he delivered the line that made my stomach go cold. "If your mother's sick, that's your problem. Don't drag your drama into my store. You're here to work, not to feel." I didn't argue. I didn't cry. I just nodded once and went back to stacking crates, because I wasn't going to win in front of his audience. I was going to win with proof. My name is Lina Morales. I was 29, an immigrant woman in the U.S., and the only caregiver for my mom after her kidney disease worsened, and dialysis became our new calendar. I depended on this job for rent, $290 for a small apartment that smelled like old carpet, and for my mom's medications, which still cost $268 a month even with assistance. I didn't have a husband to lean on, and I didn't have family to call for help, because the only family I had in Boise was Victor, and Victor knew exactly how trapped that made me. At Cedar Pine, I did everything: register, stocking, cleaning, receiving deliveries, closing paperwork, and the worst shift of all, opening alone before sunrise, when the store felt like a cold warehouse with fluorescent lights. Victor called it building character. What it really built was exhaustion. He scheduled me 6 days a week, sometimes 12-hour shifts, and he paid me $15.25 an hour, on paper. In reality, he paid me for 40 hours and told me the rest was helping the family. When I asked about overtime, he laughed like I'd told a joke. "Overtime is for strangers," he'd say, "not for blood." I told myself I could endure it, that I just needed a few months to stabilize, that once my mom's dialysis schedule settled, once I caught up on bills, I could leave. But the suffering didn't stay in the store. It came home with me. I'd wake up at 3:45 a.m., with my heart already racing, drive to the store in darkness, and unlock the doors while my mom slept with her dialysis access wrapped in gauze. I'd spend the day on my feet until my calves cramped, then drive to her clinic and sit beside her while the machine hummed, pretending I wasn't thinking about how many hours Victor would steal from me that week. Some nights I'd fall asleep fully dressed on my couch with my shoes still on. Other nights I couldn't sleep at all because my body felt wired with stress, like it didn't trust rest anymore. Victor loved to call me sensitive. He loved to tell the other employees, 2 high school kids and 1 older man named Gary, that I was dramatic if I asked for a break. "Lina's emotions are expensive," he'd say, smiling. "We run a business, not a therapy session." There was no HR, no corporate hotline, no safe place to complain. It was a family store, which meant Victor got to be the law until someone bigger than Victor cared. The breaking point came the week before Memorial Day, when my mom's nephrologist moved her dialysis time because her blood pressure had been spiking. The clinic gave us a new schedule and warned me not to miss. I showed Victor the appointment card and asked, politely, for 2 mornings off so I could get her there. He didn't even glance at the card. He stared at me like I'd asked him to donate a kidney. "You want time off?" he said. "For what? Another doctor who tells you she's still sick?" "It's dialysis," I said calmly. "She can't skip." Victor laughed and looked around the store like he wanted witnesses. "You're always begging for special treatment. You're lucky I even hired you." I swallowed the heat in my throat. "I'm not asking for special treatment. I'm asking for a schedule adjustment." Victor stepped closer, voice dropping into that intimate cruelty he saved for threats. "You know what you are, Lina? A burden with a sad story. If you can't handle it, go back to wherever you came from." The words hit hard because he knew exactly why I'd come to the U.S. in the first place. To work, to help my mom, to build something stable. He used that like a collar. Then he raised his voice again so the whole front aisle could hear. "If you walk out for her, don't come back." I don't need weak people slowing down my store. That day I worked through lunch, hands shaking, stomach empty, and I realized something. Victor wasn't going to get better. He was going to get bolder. He was going to keep taking until I broke. So I did what competent, calm people do when they're underestimated. I started collecting receipts. Not dramatic ones, simple ones, legal ones, the kind that can't be argued with. Every Sunday night, I took a photo of the schedule board with my name and the hours written in thick marker. Every shift, I took a time-stamped photo of the time clock screen when I punched in and out. When Victor texted me, "Don't write overtime on the sheet," I screenshot it. When he told me to come in at 4 a.m. to unload a delivery and clock in at 6 like usual, I screenshot it too. I took photos of my pay stubs, side by side with my documented hours. Week after week, the same pattern. 68 hours worked, 40 hours paid, sometimes 73 hours worked, still 40 paid. I didn't tell anyone I was doing it, because the moment Victor suspected I had proof, he'd try to erase it, delete schedules, lose time cards, rewrite history with his loud voice. I also started taking photos of my hands, cracked skin, bruised knuckles, the swollen red line on my wrist from lifting boxes wrong because I was rushing, not for sympathy, for context, for the way overwork shows up physically when a manager denies breaks and calls it family. By June, my mom's health worsened. One night after dialysis, she vomited in the parking lot and apologized through tears, whispering, "I'm ruining your life." I held her shoulders and told her the truth in the only way I could say it without breaking. "You're not ruining it. I'm just tired." Then I drove her home, tucked her into bed, and sat at my kitchen table with my phone and my photo folder open, feeling something settle in my chest like a decision. The next morning, before dawn, I filed a wage complaint with the Idaho Department of Labor and submitted a report to the U.S. Department of Labor Wage and Hour Division. I didn't write a novel. I wrote a timeline with numbers, dates, hours, pay rates, missing overtime, missed breaks, retaliation threats, and I attached photos, clean, time-stamped, impossible to brush off as emotional. When I hit submit, my hands shook, not because I regretted it, but because I knew exactly what Victor would do if he found out. He'd fire me, cut my mom's access to stability, and tell the family I was ungrateful. 2 days later, he did exactly what I expected. He called me into the tiny back office that smelled like receipts and cleaning chemicals. He shut the door and smiled like he was about to enjoy this. "Someone's been asking questions," he said. I kept my face calm. "About what?" Victor leaned back in his chair. "About pay, about hours." I didn't answer. He watched me for a beat, then smirked. "Let me guess. You're playing victim again." "I'm asking to be paid for the hours I work," I said. Victor's smile vanished. "No," he snapped, then recovered into a colder tone. "Here's what's going to happen. You're going to stop causing trouble. You're going to take what you get. Because you need this job more than I need you." Then he delivered the line he thought would end it. "You can't afford to fight me, Lina. And nobody cares about photos." I looked at him, calm enough to feel strange, and said one sentence that changed the air. "They will." A week later, the call came. Not to Victor. To me. An investigator named Marla Kent from the labor office asked if she could visit the store. She didn't sound angry. She sounded methodical, like someone who had seen this pattern before and knew exactly how it ended. When she asked what evidence I had, I told her the truth. Schedules, time clock photos, pay stubs, texts. There was a pause on the line. Small, meaningful. "Good," Marla said. "Bring everything." The inspection didn't happen like a movie scene with flashing lights. It happened like real accountability, early, quiet, and unstoppable. Marla showed up on a Wednesday at 10:17 a.m. I walked in with a clipboard and an ID and asked Victor for payroll records. He tried to charm her, calling her ma'am, and smiling like it was all a misunderstanding. Then she asked for time records. Victor's smile tightened. "We're a family business," he said. "We do things informally." Marla's expression didn't change. "Wage law isn't informal." In the back office, I handed over my folder of photos. Marla flipped through them slowly, eyes moving from timestamps to schedule hours to pay stubs. The longer she looked, the quieter the room became. At one point, she stopped, held up a photo of the schedule board next to my pay stub, and said, almost conversationally, "This is excellent." Not sorry, not that's awful, just excellent. Because evidence is a language inspectors understand. Victor tried to argue. He tried to claim I volunteered extra time. He tried to say I was confused about overtime rules. He even tried the family line again. "She's my niece," he said, as if that explained theft. Marla looked at him and said flatly, "That makes it worse." 2 weeks later, the findings arrived in writing. Cedar and Pine owed back wages for unpaid overtime across multiple pay periods, plus penalties for record-keeping violations. And because Victor had retaliated, cutting my hours after he suspected I'd complained, the case expanded. The total wasn't a small slap on the wrist. It was the kind of number that forces a bully to finally take you seriously. $146,380 in back wages and damages, including amounts owed to other employees whose family favors turned out to be missing overtime too. Victor exploded when he saw it. He called me at midnight, voice thick with anger. "You did this to me," he hissed. I didn't raise my voice. "You did it to yourself." He tried to threaten me again. Lawsuits, family shame, deportation jokes he thought were clever. It didn't matter. The state didn't care about his ego, and the paper trail didn't care about his denial. The final consequence landed quietly but permanently. Victor was removed as manager under the settlement terms, barred from handling payroll, and required to post wage rights notices and implement proper timekeeping. The store had to hire an outside payroll service. The informal family system died under fluorescent office light and stamped documentation. I didn't become rich. I became stable. I paid off the credit card I'd been using for dialysis copays. I moved my mom into a small ground floor unit closer to her clinic. I built an emergency fund so the next crisis wouldn't feel like a cliff. And I left Cedar and Pine, not in shame, but in peace. Because I didn't owe my uncle my life just because we shared blood. The biggest change wasn't the money. It was the moment I stopped accepting the word family as an excuse for exploitation. Now, when someone at my new job whispers that their boss is shaving hours or denying breaks, I don't give them a speech. I tell them the same simple thing that saved me. Document everything. Photos, screenshots, dates, calm timelines, proof that doesn't need anyone's permission to be real. If stories like this matter to you, stories where power is exposed, dignity is defended, and silence doesn't win, make sure you're subscribed to the channel. Every week, I share real, emotionally intense workplace justice stories like this one. Stories about people who were underestimated, pushed too far, and finally fought back in ways no one expected. Before you go, I want to ask you something. What did you feel while listening to this story? Have you ever gone through something like this? Or do you know someone who has? Someone whose health, dignity, or livelihood was treated as expendable? Share your thoughts in the comments. Your story might be the one someone else needs to hear.